Governor George Ryan, good to have you join us on the Illinois Channel, and you're coming to us from your home in Kankakee, and we want to be talking to you about your brand new book that you have come out, and let me bring that up for the people until I could be sure how I stopped the death penalty in Illinois. When did you write the book, Governor?
Within the last couple of years, but I've been working on it on and off for a long time. But really got serious about it in the last probably 15, 16 months.
What prompted you to want to write the book just now?
Well, it's kind of a long story, but it involves the fact that when I was in office, I tried to make some legislative changes to the law that would make it more difficult to execute an innocent person. And that was what got me involved in this whole thing about the death penalty. I was a strong proponent of the death penalty when I first went to the General Assembly back in '72. And then in '77, we had a vote on the floor to reinstate. The Supreme Court said that the states could reimpose the death penalty in their states, made it constitutional again. And we did that. And I recall vividly as I voted that day on the floor, I voted green. I pushed my green button, vote yes to reinstate the death penalty. And a fellow on the Democrat side stood up and said, for those of you that are voting green today, how many of you would be willing to throw the switch and kill somebody? And that was kind of a sober thought about it. And said, I believe in the death penalty, and I think it's probably a deterrent to crime, and it should be one of the tools that's available for the Justice Department and people in the law business. And so I voted for it anyway. And little did I know that some 20 years I'd be the fellow that would probably have my hand on the switch to kill somebody. So I decided that we should have some changes in the law, and I proposed through a commission that I appointed some 85 changes to the law. And the General Assembly was up for re-election that year, and so they passed one bill that allowed for or directed that confessions to death penalty cases had to be read. And that's where we were. And the other four recommendations were just kind of died on the vine. So I decided that if I was going to leave office, and I was going to retire, I only had a short time left to get anything done and couldn't get it done. So I called for a moratorium and then a commutation to make sure that, that nobody would die after I left that was guilty.
I remember I was the bureau chief for WAND television during your term in office, and I remember you would have a Christmas party, which was always a nice thing to go to when you were a governor, and we were at the governor's mansion, and at the end of the party there was about 4 or 5 reporters. I was one of them, and we were standing around you talking. And I remember you saying kind of what you had just told us, that you had been a supporter of the death penalty, but that am I right if I'm remembering this correctly, wasn't there a death penalty certificate that you did sign earlier in your term as governor?
Yes, there was. One case.
And you were referring to that, and you said, it was one of those moments that stuck with me, and one of the pleasures as a reporter to be able to talk directly with the governor and hear you talking on a personal basis. And you said, it's one thing to vote for it on the floor of the House, which you just referred to, but it's a different thing when they put a piece of paper in front of you and you know when you sign your name to that someone is going to die. And so tell us again, in that moment, how did that emotionally impact you when you were the governor and you were faced with that reality?
Well, I was the only person, except I had one person on my staff in this particular case you're talking about, where I allowed the penalty to go through. the death penalty. It was for a fellow named Andrew Corkialis, and he and a gang of people used to go around the city of Chicago and drag young women off of the streets and do terrible things to them and throw them back out on the street for dead. And one of them lived, and that's how we caught him. But the case was kind of, we had the real trigger of the case was the case about a young black man that had been 16 years on death row and then found out that he was innocent and let go. And so it all kind of came together that if, anything done with this, we had to do it quick because I was getting out of office. But to do the Corkialis case, it still kind of sticks with me. I had a lot of people that were for him being executed, and I had a lot of people that were against him being executed. He was Greek, and the bishop of the Greek church was on my phone every day pleading with me not to execute him. And then I had my whole staff that I worked with were in favor of executing him. So I only had one person on my staff that was with me that where we maybe would have to look at it pretty hard. But I finally conceded that it was a just case and then we should execute him. And I went ahead with the execution, signed it, and he was executed. And it still kind of sticks with me. No doubt in my mind he was guilty and probably deserving, but to be the one that has to say you've killed somebody is not pleasant.
I will admit that, like you, I was in favor of the death penalty, and sometimes when you hear about some particularly heinous crime, I still sometimes feel like, you want to do that, probably more out of a sense of revenge, I suppose, which is natural. But when later, now you put, for the viewers that don't know and don't recall the history of this, you put a moratorium on the use of the death penalty in the last days of your administration. I think you only had something like 10 days left in office or so when you applied the moratorium. And then that moratorium remained until the time of Governor Quinn. So it went through Governor Blagojevich. And then when Governor Quinn, I don't remember the exact year, but he then, the legislature passed and he signed a bill outlawing the use of the death penalty in Illinois. In that time period, I will share that there was a fellow who had been wrongfully convicted and had spent 12 years on death row, Randy Steidel, who spoke to me and said, Terry, if you really want to punish someone, don't kill them. Keep them on death row, because he said that was so much punishment to be locked up where time just weighs on you, nothing happens, and you go hour after hour. He said that's far more punishment than actually putting someone to death, because many times these people who are on death row would prefer to be dead than living on death row. And it kind of made me think, and what do I know compared to a guy who spent 12 years on death row? Well, you were also, though, when I think you alluded to this, and you're bringing back some memories, on the commission you had, and I think former Senator, the late Senator Paul Simon was involved in that, if I recall. And what we did find out is that there were a number of things that were really problematic in the use of the death penalty back then.
That's exactly right. It was full of, it was just fraught with error in every way.
The problem was, like one of the things, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, they did not record the interrogations of those who were arrested for a crime, and now they do. And so we also had simultaneous to about that time, I forget all the sequence of events, but we had some detectives from the Chicago Police Department who had been basically beating confessions out of people. So people were confessing to crimes that they weren't necessarily guilty of. That was just one of the problems.
That was John Berg.
Yeah. So when you were, what prompted you to move? Was it just what we had talked about earlier, that the reality that when you signed a paper, someone was going to die? Was that what prompted you to put in the moratorium, or was it what you heard from the commission?
Well, it was basically what I had heard from the commission, but I also got a call from the Attorney General of Illinois telling me that I ought to sign the death warrant on Corkialis because there were more people in the pipeline that were coming down, the moratorium, and that's what stopped the proceedings of the death penalty. I just didn't sign the death warrant until I then finally, in the end, commuted the sentences of everybody on death row to life in prison. Nobody went free. They all got to life in prison without parole.
I know you took a lot of static from people at that time for doing that. And on the other hand, you were also nominated, as I recall, for the Nobel Peace Prize for putting the moratorium on.
Yes, I did. A professor from the University of Illinois, Francis Boyle. He was a member of the Nobel Committee. He and a committee out of the university. And they nominated me, I think, 5 or 6 times for the Nobel Peace Prize.
When you look back at having put the moratorium on the death penalty, does this does that stack up as one of the things you're most proud of in your career?
Well, I'm glad I did it because it brought some attention. You know, there's only 28 states now that are left that have the death penalty in the United States, and there's some 2,600 death penalty prisoners that are awaiting death. So there's 28 states plus the federal government that still have the death penalty. And this book, I hope, and all of these things that we're talking about here today, explains a lot of what I did and how I did it and why I did it. And yeah, I'm glad I did it. And I would guess if I had the opportunity to do it again, I think I would. But I wrote the book because after all of the years since I declared the moratorium and they disbarred the death penalty, or they barred it, there haven't been many changes. So the death penalty is still going on in other states in the United States. I think they're going to execute some people today. So when you see people that spend 15, 16, maybe even 20 years on death row, and then the judge and the courts come in and say, oops, we made a mistake, that's not very pleasant to wake up every morning for 20 years and you ask yourself, is today they're going to get electrocuted and be killed? And then somebody walks in and says, well, you're a free, you didn't do it, and we're going to let you go. And that's what happened in too many cases. So I just decided that it was time to bring out some more, to bring some more attention to the death penalty. I think they're executing 2 people today on the federal level.
You know, I've said to my conservative friends, and you were, I think, viewed yourself as a conservative in most of your career, I would think. I've said to my conservative friends, we're often pointing out how government can't do anything right, but they make the mistake of thinking when it comes to law enforcement they do everything right, and that's not true either. So we get to the title of your book, Until I Could Be Sure, and that really, I think, comes down to even though you were the governor, it doesn't mean that you could control every aspect of the criminal justice system. And there were just, as you said, too many errors within the system that when people were being convicted for a capital offense, that you just couldn't be sure in the system that they were actually getting, that they were in fact guilty. And we have seen subsequently over the years how many times that people were wrongfully convicted, and it's far more times than I think people imagine. If someone wants to have your book, where can they find it?
Well, Amazon for sure, and Barnes and Noble still have some. Barnes and have it in stock. I'm not sure whether they have it in Springfield or not, but they might. But Amazon for sure, you can order it on Amazon and get it within a few days.
Governor George Ryan, we appreciate you joining us. Thank you. Good luck on the book. I'm sure it will be for all of us who are in Illinois following politics, as well as people around the world who are interested in the issue of the death penalty. would appreciate getting your comments and hearing more about the leadership that you provided on this issue. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and I look forward to seeing you a little later on sometime.
Thank you, Jordan.